This is the first module for IoT Central Device Training. And this is a series of 17 different modules that we've put together in kind of a sequence that are designed to help you get a Raspberry Pi configured, connected, working with Azure IoT Central, and kind of running your different IoT scenarios that might be interesting for you to kind of experiment with and try out. And the Raspberry Pi is a very powerful computer, so to speak, and it has all kinds of nifty little things that allow you to do scenarios for sensors and reading things and data acquisition and stuff like that. And we'll cover that in some of the other modules to kind of show you how to do breadboarding, what sensors are and how they work. But our very first thing that we want to do here is get the Pi configured so that we can start booting it up. And that's done through this little card here, this little SD card. And it's a micro SD card, and this is 16 gig, which is pretty much sufficient for the kind of things that we're doing here. Slides into the bottom of the Raspberry Pi, and then when the Raspberry Pi gets power, the little red light comes on, and that's right here. And then when it starts to boot the operating system, the little green light will flash, kind of like your disk drive does on your computer when it's actually reading stuff off of it. So that's kind of the step that we're trying to get to first, right? And so it's a nifty little setup. I mean, it's such a compact little thing that does so much. It's pretty interesting. I love the Raspberry Pi. I think it's just one of the greatest hobbyist things. Of course, there's Arduino and some of the other ones, but I'm a huge fan of the Pi, mainly because it does some really neat things. And one of the things that I really enjoy about it is the fact that it has kind of an official version of a touchscreen that integrates very easily to the Pi. So it screws onto the back of it, uses a single ribbon cable, and then when the operating system's on there, it automatically boots up, and I've got a full-fledged kind of windowing system, a graphical user interface that looks like Windows or Linux or the Mac, and I can then configure everything and run it, just like I'm working on a computer. So it's pretty neat. So you still need to plug a keyboard in so that you can type things and stuff like that, but for the most part, you got a touch screen, you can move things around, so it makes it pretty nifty. So this is how I like to get it set up. And what's nice about this too is that I can just put the operating system on and boot the thing up and then do all the configuration that I need to do right from the screen instead of having to do some of the other things that when you're in a headless scenario where you may not have the ability to actually configure it this way and you want to get it onto your Wi-Fi network, and we cover that a little bit. So let's go back and take a look here, and let's start with the module. And so the very first thing that we need to do is we need to get 3 pieces of software kind of on our computer, so to speak. And the first one is your official SD card formatter. And I like to use the formatter that is specific from the SD Card Foundation, and it's their formatter works perfectly. Now, this is important because when you go to burn the image onto your SD card, you're going to want to make sure that it's formatted correctly and you're maximizing all of the space that you actually have on that card. So I do not recommend that you go ahead and right mouse click and format the thing on your Windows machine or your Linux machine or your Linux machine or whatever, unless you know how to do that and you know exactly what you're doing. But this card formatter works perfectly. I generally like to use the very slow version of it, format the thing, make sure it's perfectly clean and ready to go. So that's your very first piece of software. You download it from here. It's in the links. And of course, we'll have the links to the GitHub site where all this the modules are at within the YouTube video notes. So you make sure you'll have that. The next thing we want to do is get the balenaEtcher. And this is a tool that allows you to take that downloaded version of your Raspbian operating system and put it onto the card, right? And it does a fantastic job of that, along with verification and making sure that everything's working. And the tool's just drop dead easy. So it's really easy to use. It's a very elegant tool. So again, you just you select the image, you select your drive, and you flash it, and it's ready to go. So I love this tool. Very well done. Nice piece of software. And then finally, you want to choose your operating system. As of today, in May of 2020, we are using the Buster version of the Raspbian distribution. Raspbian is a flavor or a distribution in the world of Linux that has been built on Debian. And so it has things specifically in the distribution that are designed to be configured for the Raspberry Pi itself. So it's got some configuration stuff, it communicates with the hardware, it does some really cool things. So this is kind of my recommended version. If you're more advanced, you can use any version of Linux that you're comfortable with. But I like to use Raspbian. It's the one that they make it easy to use, and most of the tutorials that you're going to run into refer to this as the operating system. You have 3 versions. A very lightweight version where it's nothing but the headless version of the operating system without any graphical user interface. And then there's one with the desktop, and there's one with all the tools. I tend to use the one with all the tools because I like having all that stuff, and it doesn't cost me too much as far as running on the Pi. So you download that, you're ready to go. So once you got those three things onto your machine, I kind of walk you through in this module here of how to format the SD card, how to use the etcher to actually get the image that you downloaded onto it. And then I cover some things here about if you don't have the ability to plug a keyboard and a monitor into your Pi or use the touchscreen that I showed you, you're going to want to do some configuration file work so that your SSH, which is how we're going to communicate over terminal to the device when we actually write code, and then also your Wi-Fi so that it gets connected up and it's on your network so that you can see the thing and actually start communicating with it. So I cover that in these instructions here. And then finally, once you got everything ready to go, place it into the Raspberry Pi and we're ready to boot up. And that will be the thing that we're going to talk about next. We'll see you then.